What if Jaime Lannister lost his hand before the War of the Five Kings? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The morning sun catches the gold thread in Jaime Lannister's white cloak as he adjusts his helm beneath the royal pavilion. The tourney of the hand has drawn the greatest knights in the realm to King's Landing, and the crowds roar their approval from the packed stands. Banners snap in the spring breeze. Tyrell roses, Baratheon stags, Stark direwolves all come to honor the memory of Jon Arryn and celebrate Ned Stark's appointment as Hand of the King. Jaime tests the weight of his lance, feeling the familiar balance that has served him so well in countless tournaments. At 28, he stands at the peak of his prowess, the finest knight in the Seven Kingdoms. Even his enemies acknowledge this truth. The small folk cheer his name when he rides past, their voices carrying across the tournament grounds like thunder. The final joust approaches. Ser Jaime, calls Ser Barristan Selmy, his fellow Kingsguard knight. Young Loras has proven himself quite capable today. Jaime glances toward the Tyrell pavilion, where Sir Loras Tyrell dons his helm, the Knight of Flowers preparing for what everyone assumes will be a brief and decisive encounter. The boy is skilled, Jaime grants him that, but he is still just a boy of 16. Speed and pretty techniques cannot overcome years of hard-won experience. He rides well, Jaime says, mounting his destrier with practiced ease. But I've unhorsed better knights than him before my morning meal. The crowd's anticipation builds to a fever pitch as both knights take their positions at opposite ends of the lists. King Robert sits forward in his seat, wine cup forgotten, while Queen Cersei watches with that familiar mixture of pride and desire in her green eyes. Jaime catches her gaze and nods slightly. Today, like always, he will make his sister proud. Tywin Lannister observes from the high seats with his usual stone expression, but Jaime knows his father well enough to read the expectation there. A Lannister victory here will cement their family's position at court. The Hands tournament has political weight beyond mere sport, and everyone knows it. The herald's voice carries across the field. Ser Jaime Lannister of the Kingsguard, Sir Loras Tyrell of Highgarden, ride forth and show your valor. Jaime spurs his horse forward, lowering his lance as he has done hundreds of times before. The familiar thunder of hooves builds beneath him, the crowd's roar fading to a distant murmur as his world narrows to the approaching night. Loras rides with surprising power for his slight frame, his own lance steady and true. They close the distance with frightening speed. Jaime aims for the center of Loras's shield, calculating the precise angle that will lift the young knight from his saddle without serious injury. The boy deserves respect, not humiliation. Their lances crash together with tremendous force, the impact traveling up Jaime's arm like lightning. But something goes wrong. Loras's lance, crafted from ash wood and meant to splinter harmlessly upon impact, fails to break cleanly. Instead, a jagged shard pierces through a gap in Jaime's gauntlet, driving through steel and leather and flesh with sickening ease. The wood punches completely through his right wrist, pinning his hand to the lance shaft. Jaime's scream cuts through the tournament ground like a blade. His destrier rears and bolts, dragging him from the saddle as the splintered lance refuses to release his mangled hand. He hits the ground hard, armor clanging against packed earth, but the agony in his wrist drowns out everything else. Blood streams between his fingers, more blood than should be possible. The wooden shaft has severed something vital, something that cannot be mended. Jaime stares at his sword hand, his famous, golden, perfect sword hand, and sees only ruin. Grand Maester Pycelle reaches him first, his ancient legs moving faster than they have in years. Other Maesters follow, their faces grave as they examine the wound. Jaime tries to flex his fingers, but nothing happens. The hand that has killed kings and protected queens hangs lifeless, connected to his wrist by sinew and skin alone. "Get it out," Jaime gasps, his voice hoarse with pain. "Cut the lance. Pull out the splinter. Do something." Pycelle's watery eyes meet his with something approaching pity. "Ser Jaime, the damage is..." Extensive. The wood has destroyed the bones of your wrist, severed the great vessels. Even if we could repair the flesh, the hand would never function again. No. The word comes out as barely a whisper. No, you're wrong. You have to. The hand must come off, Pycelle says quietly. Today, before the corruption spreads. I'm sorry, my lord. The world tilts sideways. Jaime tries to push himself upright with his good hand, but darkness creeps in at the edges of his vision. Around him, he can hear the shocked murmur of 10,000 voices, the sound of a realm watching their greatest night broken in an instant. Cersei appears at his side, her beautiful face pale with horror. She reaches for his wounded hand, then stops herself, fingers hovering over the blood-soaked splinters. Jaime, my love, you'll be— Don't, he cuts her off. The word tastes like ash in his mouth. Don't say it will be fine. Don't lie to me. Sir Loras kneels nearby, his young face stricken with guilt and disbelief. The Knight of Flowers has just destroyed the most famous knight in Westeros with a single unlucky thrust. Sir Jaime, I never meant, like the lance wasn't supposed to. I know. Jaime's voice sounds strange, distant. These things happen. But they don't happen to him. Not to Jaime Lannister, the man who has never lost a tourney, never been defeated in single combat, never been anything less than perfect with a sword in his right hand. That hand lies motionless in the dirt, still wearing its white leather glove, still beautiful and still completely useless. Tywin Lannister appears at the edge of his vision, his Lord Father's face carved from stone. No sympathy there, only calculation. Already, Jaime knows, the old lion is weighing the cost of this disaster, measuring how it will affect House Lannister's position at court. Carry him to his chambers, Tywin commands. Summon every maester in the city. Do whatever can be done. But they all know what can be done. The greatest knight in the Seven Kingdoms will wake tomorrow with one hand, and everything, his identity, his purpose, his very sense of self, will be gone with the other. As they lift him onto a stretcher, Jaime catches sight of his white cloak, now stained red with his blood. The cloak of a Kingsguard knight, sworn to defend the royal family with his life. How can a one-handed man serve in the Kingsguard? How can a cripple protect anyone? The crowd parts before the procession, carrying him toward the Red Keep. Their cheers have turned to whispers, their excitement to morbid fascination. The Golden Lion has fallen, and the realm will never be quite the same. Hours later, as milk of the poppy clouds his thoughts and the maesters prepare their bone saws, Jaime stares at the ceiling of his chamber and tries to imagine a future without his sword hand. He cannot. The man who has defined himself by his skill with a blade, who has shaped his entire identity around being the perfect knight, lies broken on a narrow bed, while servants light candles against the gathering dusk. Tomorrow, when the worst of the pain fades and the stump begins to heal, Jaime Lannister will have to discover who he is when he can no longer be who he was. The tawny ground has taken more than his hand. It has taken the very foundation of his existence. And in the weeks to come, as ravens carry word of his injury to every corner of Westeros, lords and ladies will begin to whisper a new question. What happens to the realm when its most dangerous knight becomes just another crippled lordling? The golden hand that once wielded Oathkeeper and killed Aerys Targaryen will be replaced by metal and leather. But perhaps, in losing the hand that made him famous, Jaime Lannister might discover strengths he never knew he possessed. Perhaps the Lion's greatest victories still lay ahead. The Raven arrives at Casterly Rock 3 days after the tourney, its black wings carrying news that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros. Tywin Lannister reads the message twice, his pale green eyes betraying nothing as he absorbs the implications. His son, his golden son, the finest knight in the realm, has been reduced to a cripple by a 16-year-old boy with flowers on his shield. The Lord of Casterly Rock sets the parchment aside and stares out at the sunset sea. For 28 years he has spent building House Lannister into the most feared name in the Seven Kingdoms. 28 years of careful planning, ruthless enforcement, and strategic marriages. Now, in a single moment of splintered wood and twisted steel, that reputation hangs by a thread. Within hours, Tywin is riding hard for King's Landing with a column of household guards. The journey that usually takes a week is completed in 5 days of relentless riding. When he arrives at the Red Keep, dust-covered and grim-faced, every lord and servant knows that the old lion has come to protect his cubs. Jaime sits propped up in his chamber, pale from blood loss and milk of the poppy, his right arm ending in neat bandages where his hand used to be. The golden prosthetic commissioned from the city's finest smiths lies on the table beside him, a beautiful mockery of what he has lost. "Father," Jaime says, his voice hoarse but steady, "come to see the family cripple." Tywin's expression doesn't change as he takes in his son's condition. "I've come to assess the damage, to our family, to our position." The words cut deeper than any sword might have. Jaime's green eyes flash with something between anger and despair. "Your assessment, my lord?" "Severe, but not irreparable." Tywin moves to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "You were the sword of House Lannister. Now we must find other weapons." Before Jaime can respond, the door opens to admit Cersei and Tyrion. The Queen enters with her usual grace, though Jaime notices how her eyes linger on his bandaged stump before meeting his gaze. Tyrion follows, walking stick in hand, his mismatched eyes taking in the scene with sharp intelligence. "How touching," Tyrion says, settling into a chair. "A family reunion in the invalid's quarters." "Enough," Tywin snaps. "We have matters to discuss, private matters." He moves to the door, checking the corridor before closing it firmly, and positioning himself where he can watch both the entrance and the window. When he speaks again, his voice drops to barely above a whisper. "The court senses weakness. Already I've heard whispers in the corridors. Lords who once stepped aside when they saw our banners now meet my eyes with something approaching challenge. This," he gestures toward Jaime's ruined arm, "this changes everything." Cersei's jaw tightens. "They wouldn't dare." "They would and they will," Tywin cuts her off. "Robert made a jest of it at court yesterday, but called Jaime the Golden Stump, in front of half the nobility. When a king mocks a great house openly, lesser men take notice." Jaime closes his eyes, shame burning in his chest. "What did Ned Stark say?" "Nothing. He said nothing at all, which tells me more than any words could." Tywin's pale gaze fixes on each of his children in turn. The hand of the king smiled, slightly, but he smiled. "The man who has feared your sword since the day you earned your spurs now sees you as manageable." The word hangs in the air like a curse. Jaime Lannister, who has never been managed by any man save his father, who has killed kings and broken sieges and won every tournament worth winning, is now seen as manageable. "Stannis Baratheon has requested a private audience with me tomorrow," Tywin continues. "What the man who hasn't spoken 10 words to our family in 5 years suddenly wants to discuss matters of mutual interest. He smells opportunity in your misfortune." Tyrion shifts forward in his chair. "And Littlefinger?" "Already probing, asking careful questions about our shipping arrangements with the Free Cities, testing whether we might be flexible regarding certain long-standing agreements." Tywin's voice carries the weight of years of carefully maintained alliances. When a man's sword arm is his reputation, losing that arm means losing everything built upon it. Cersei moves closer to Jaime's bed, her hand hovering near his good arm, but not quite touching. "There must be something we can do, some way to show strength." "There is," Tywin says, "but not through Jaime. Not anymore." The words hit like a physical blow. Jaime has spent his entire adult life as the sword of House Lannister, the Golden Prince who made their enemies fear to move against them. Now his father speaks of showing strength as if he is no longer part of the equation. "I can still fight," Jaime says, his voice tight with desperation. "I can learn to use my left hand. Many men are not Jaime Lannister," Tywin replies coldly. "Many men do not have reputations built on being the finest warrior alive. When they see you struggle with a sword meant for your weaker hand, they will not see determination. They will see proof that the lion's fangs have been pulled." Tyrion clears his throat. "Perhaps we're approaching this wrong. Jaime was our military deterrent, yes, but there are other forms of power." "Such as?" Cersei asks, though her tone suggests she already knows she won't like the answer. "Intelligence, alliances, political maneuvering." Tyrion's eyes gleam with something like excitement. "Our enemies expect us to flail about like a wounded animal, trying to replace strength with strength. What if we become something else entirely? Something they don't expect?" Tywin considers this, his pale eyes calculating. "Continue." "Jaime knows more about the personal secrets of this court than any man alive. Years of tournaments, hunts and social gatherings. Years of being the Golden Prince that everyone confides in." Tyrion looks at his brother. "How many affairs have you covered for? How many indiscretions overlooked? How many private conversations overheard?" Jaime stares at his younger brother, understanding beginning to dawn. "You're suggesting I become a different kind of weapon. I'm suggesting you become the kind of weapon they'll never see coming." Tyrion's smile is sharp as a blade. "Let them think the lion has been declawed. Meanwhile, we gather information, build alliances, position ourselves for the future. When they finally realize what we've become, it will be far too late." Tywin nods slowly. "There is wisdom in this, but it will require adjustment from all of us." The room falls silent as the implications sink in. Jaime stares at his golden prosthetic, the beautiful lie that will replace his ruined hand. Perhaps it is fitting. His entire identity has been a kind of beautiful lie. The perfect knight, the Golden Prince, the warrior without equal. Now he must become something new. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. Sir Boros Blount enters, his white cloak pristine and his expression uncomfortable. "Sir Jaime," he says formally, "Lord Commander Selmy requests your presence in the White Sword Tower, at your earliest convenience." The euphemism hangs heavy in the air. Jaime knows what awaits him there, the formal ceremony that will strip him of his white cloak, the official acknowledgement that a cripple cannot serve in the King's Guard. Another piece of his old identity prepared for the flames. "Tell Ser Barristan I will attend him within the hour," Jaime says, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. After Blount leaves, Tywin moves to the door. "We will speak again tonight, all of us. There are plans to be made and roles to be assigned." He pauses, his hand on the latch. "The old Jaime Lannister died in that tourney field. What rises in his place will depend entirely on what you choose to become." When the door closes behind their father, the three Lannister siblings sit in silence. Outside, King's Landing continues its daily business, unaware that one of its greatest predators has just begun its transformation from a creature of fang and claw into something far more dangerous, a creature of mind and shadow. Jaime flexes the fingers of his left hand, testing their strength, their coordination. They feel clumsy and weak compared to his right, but they are what he has now. Everything else, his reputation, his identity, his very sense of self, must be rebuilt from nothing. "The golden hand that holds a sword rules through fear," he murmurs, remembering something he once read in a book of philosophy. But the mind that guides the realm rules through wisdom, Tyrion finishes, or at least through superior information. Cersei looks between her brothers, something like hope flickering in her green eyes for the first time since the accident. They have no idea what's coming, do they? No, Jaime says, reaching for his golden prosthetic with his left hand. They don't. The boar's tusks find their mark, just as they always would have, tearing through royal flesh with the same brutal efficiency that fate has always demanded. King Robert Baratheon dies in his tent 3 days after the hunt, wine and blood mixing on his lips as he gasps out his final words. The realm holds its breath, waiting for the storm that must surely follow. But this time, the storm finds the Lannisters without their greatest weapon. Jaime stands, awkward and off balance, in the throne room as Joffrey ascends the Iron Throne for the first time as king. His golden prosthetic catches the morning light streaming through the tall windows, beautiful and utterly useless. Around him, lords and courtiers watch the coronation with calculating eyes, measuring the young king's strength and finding it wanting. "Your Grace," Lord Varys says, his silk voice carrying across the stone floor. The matter of succession requires immediate attention. There are questions being raised. Cersei's green eyes flash with something between rage and desperation. In years past, such questions would have been met with steel. Jaime would have made it clear, without words, that challenging the legitimacy of her children meant facing the finest sword in the Seven Kingdoms. Now, that those same questions hang in the air like smoke, unanswered and dangerous. "What questions?" Joffrey demands, his boy's voice cracking with the effort to sound regal. "Genealogical concerns, Your Grace. Matters of bloodline." Varys's pale hands flutter like birds. "Lord Eddard has been spending considerable time in the royal library of late, researching the histories of great houses." Jaime feels his stomach clench. He knows exactly what Ned Stark is researching, what conclusions the Honourable Lord of Winterfell must be drawing. The seed is strong. Always. The seed is strong. Robert's black hair and blue eyes, passed down through generations of Baratheon kings, nowhere to be found in his supposed children. In the past, this moment would have called for a different kind of response. Jaime would have found Ned Stark in some quiet corridor, would have made it clear that pursuing such dangerous lines of inquiry could be hazardous to one's health. A few quiet words, a hand resting meaningfully on a sword hilt, and the matter would have been settled. Now Jaime's hand rests on nothing but empty air. "Perhaps," he says, stepping forward despite the awkwardness of his movement, "Lord Stark's research would benefit from guidance. Someone to help him understand the complexities of royal lineage." Grandmaster Pycelle nods eagerly. "Indeed, Sir Jaime. Such matters require delicate handling. Misunderstandings can lead to unfortunate conclusions." But even as the old man speaks, Jaime can see the calculation in his watery eyes. Pycelle, who once deferred automatically to Lannister power, now weighs his words more carefully. The balance has shifted, and everyone can feel it. Meanwhile, in the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark spreads genealogy charts across his desk with the methodical precision of a man building a case for treason. Sir Barristan Selmy stands beside him, the old knight's face grave as he studies the evidence. "Every child born to Robert has his colouring," Ned says quietly. "Black of hair, blue of eyes. Every child but 3. "Dangerous words, my lord," Barristan warns, though his tone suggests he has reached the same conclusion. "Dangerous truths." Ned's grey eyes are steel, and for the first time in years, I can speak them without fearing that golden-haired shadow will appear in my chamber with a blade. The words cut through the political landscape like a sword through silk. For 20 years, Jaime's reputation has been Cersei's shield, protecting her secrets through the simple threat of what he might do to those who uncovered them. Now that shield lies shattered in a tourney field, leaving her children's illegitimacy exposed to the light. Cersei paces her solar like a caged lioness, her beauty transformed into something fierce and desperate. Jaime watches her from his chair, his golden hand resting uselessly in his lap. Once he would have calmed her fears with promises of steel and blood. Now he can offer only words. Ned Stark is honorable to a fault, he says. He won't act without proof. He has proof, Cersei snaps, rounding on him. The same proof that Jon Arryn died for, the same proof that any man with eyes can see. Look at them, Jaime. Or look at our children and tell me they resemble anything of Robert. The helplessness crashes over him like a wave. His beautiful sister, his golden children, his family's very survival, all threatened, and he can do nothing but sit and watch. The man who killed kings to protect those he loved has been reduced to an observer in his own life. There are other ways to handle this, he says, though the words taste like ash. Political solutions, alliances. Political solutions? Cersei's laugh is bitter. From the man who has spent his life believing that every problem could be solved with a sword? Don't you understand? Without your reputation, without the fear you inspired, we are just another noble family. Wealthy, yes. Powerful, perhaps. But not untouchable. The truth of it burns in his chest. For years, House Lannister has ruled through a combination of gold and terror, and Jaime has been the steel edge of that terror. Lords who might have opposed Tywin's will, who might have questioned Cersei's actions, who might have looked too closely at her children's parentage, all of them had stayed their hands because of what Jaime might do. A knock at the door interrupts his brooding. Sir Boros Blount enters, his white cloak pristine, and his expression nervous. Your Grace, Lord Stark requests an audience. He says it concerns matters of succession. Cersei's face goes pale, then flush with anger. Tell Lord Stark that the Queen is indisposed. He was insistent, Your Grace. He mentioned that the King's legitimacy was a matter of urgent concern. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. Ned Stark, or the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms, is ready to accuse the Queen of treason and her children of bastardy. In any other time, this would be the moment for Jaime to step forward, to make it clear that some accusations came with a price written in blood. Instead, he rises awkwardly from his chair, his balance still uncertain without his right hand to steady him. Tell Lord Stark that we will receive him shortly. After Blount leaves, Cersei stares at him with something approaching desperation. What are you doing? What I must, what I can. Jaime meets her eyes, seeing his own fears reflected there. I cannot fight him with steel any more, Cersei. But perhaps I can fight him with words. Words? Against Ned Stark's honor, against the truth he carries, against his mercy, against his love for his family, or against every weakness that honor brings with it. Jaime's voice grows stronger as he speaks. He is a good man, sister, and good men can be reasoned with. When Lord Stark enters the Solar, he moves with the confidence of a man who holds truth like a weapon. His grey eyes take in the scene. Cersei standing by the window, Jaime seated at the table, both of them obviously waiting for this confrontation. Your Grace, Ned says formally. Sir Jaime, I believe we have matters to discuss. Indeed we do, Jaime replies, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. We are all civilized people here. Ned remains standing. I think not. What I have to say is better said quickly. Then say it, Cersei snaps, her patience finally breaking. Your children are bastards, Ned says simply. Born of incest and lies. They have no claim to the Iron Throne. The words drop into the room like stones into still water, sending ripples of consequence in every direction. In the past, those words would have meant Lord Stark's death within the hour. Jaime would have killed him where he stood, honor and consequences be damned. Now, Jaime can only sit and meet Ned's gaze with whatever dignity he can muster. That is a grave accusation, Lord Stark. It is the truth. Truth is a luxury that kingdoms can rarely afford, Jaime says quietly, Tell me, my lord, what do you intend to do with this truth of yours? What honor demands? What justice requires? And what of mercy? Jaime leans forward, his golden hand catching the light. What of the innocent? My children have done no wrong beyond being born. Would you punish them for their parents' sins? For the first time, Ned hesitates. The uncertainty flickers across his face like shadow, and Jaime presses his advantage. You have daughters, Lord Stark. You love them. Would you see them suffer for choices they never made? This is not about them. This is about the realm. The realm. Jaime's voice grows cold. The realm that you would plunge into war. The realm that would bleed while you pursue your perfect justice. Ned's jaw tightens. Better war than lies. Spoken like a man who has never seen a battlefield covered with the bodies of innocents, Jaime replies. I have, my lord. I have seen what happens when honor demands blood. The dead care nothing for justice. The confrontation continues, words replacing swords, but the outcome feels inevitable. Without the threat of Jaime's blade to stay his hand, Ned Stark will do what honor demands. He will expose the truth, no matter the cost. And in the days that follow, as ravens carry word of the succession crisis to every corner of Westeros, as lords choose sides and armies begin to march, one truth becomes clear. The War of the Five Kings will begin not because the Kingslayer was too strong, but because he was too weak to prevent it. The golden hand that once killed kings now cannot even save them. The ravens fly from Winterfell with unprecedented speed, carrying Robb Stark's call to arms across the vast expanse of the north. In years past, such a summons would have been tempered by caution, measured against the terrible possibility of facing Jaime Lannister in the field. Now, that the young wolf moves with the confidence of a man who knows his greatest enemy has been declawed. 20,000 swords, Maester Luwin says, reading the responses as they arrive. The Karstarks pledge 3,000. The Umbers will bring their full strength. Even Lord Manderley promises his knights. Robb stands before the great hearth in Winterfell's hall, his blue eyes bright with purpose. At 17, he possesses his father's honor, but not yet his caution. The thought of facing Lannister, forces without the legendary Kingslayer leading them, has transformed a desperate gamble into something approaching certainty. What news from the Riverlands? He asks. Your grandfather has called his banners as well. The Tullys, Mallisters, Brackens, all march to defend River Run. Luwin hesitates, then adds, But my lord, what reports suggest the Lannisters are adapting. Tyrion Lannister has assumed command of their western forces. The imp? Robb's voice carries a note of surprise. Not Jaime. Jaime Lannister serves in an advisory capacity. His injuries from the tourney have rendered him unfit for field command. The words hang in the air like a promise of easier victories. Every northern lord in the hall knows what this means. The Golden Lion, who has terrorized battlefields for 2 decades, has been reduced to a cripple offering suggestions from a tent. The balance of power has shifted fundamentally. Meanwhile, in the royal solar at King's Landing, another wolf circles his prey. Stannis Baratheon stands rigid before the Iron Throne, his jaw set like stone as he addresses his nephew. I am the rightful king, he declares, his voice echoing off the throne room walls. Robert had no true-born children. The boy who sits that chair is a bastard born of incest. Cersei rises from her seat beside the throne, her green eyes flashing dangerously. How dare you? I dare because I speak the truth, Stannis cuts her off, and because the sword that once silenced such truths now lies broken in a cripple's scabbard. The insult lands like a physical blow. In years past, those words would have meant Stannis's death before the sun set. Jaime would have made it personal, would have found the Lord of Dragonstone in some dark corridor, and settled the matter with steel. Now, Stannis speaks his accusations openly, in front of the court, knowing that no golden hand will reach for a sword. Joffrey's boy's voice cracks as he shouts, Seize him! We seize the traitor. But Stannis is already backing toward the great doors, his own men forming a protective shield around him. I will have what is mine by right, he calls back, and I will take it from you with fire and blood. The Lord of Dragonstone departs King's Landing that very day, his ships black against the sunset, as they carry him to safety. Behind him, he leaves a court that suddenly understands how exposed they truly are. Without Jaime's reputation to cow their enemies, the Lannisters must rely on gold and politics alone. On Pike, in his sea-carved halls, Balon Greyjoy receives news of the mainland's chaos with cold satisfaction. The Kraken has waited years for such an opportunity, has nursed his grudges and planned his revenge through long seasons of enforced peace. Now, with the great houses tearing each other apart and their greatest warrior reduced to a gilded stump, the time has come to reclaim what was lost. Father, Theon Greyjoy says, uncertainty flickering in his young eyes. The Starks raised me with honor. Robb is like a brother to me. The Starks are wolves, and wolves die, Balon replies, his voice like grinding stone. We are ironborn. We take what we want, and we bow to no mainland lord. His dark eyes glitter with ambition, especially not when their protectors have lost their fangs. The Iron Islands begin their preparations for war with a fervor born of years of suppressed rage. Ships take to the water, reavers sharpen their axes, and the ancient battle songs echo once more through the halls of Pike. The Greyjoys will strike while the lions are weak, while their golden prince cannot lead charges or break sieges. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister studies maps with the methodical precision of a man rebuilding a strategy from nothing. The great table in his solar bears markers representing armies, supply lines, and political alliances, all of it rendered suddenly uncertain by his son's injury. The boy king will not hold the throne through charisma alone, Kevan Lannister observes, standing at his brother's shoulder. We need victories in the field. Then we shall have them, Tyrion says from the doorway, entering with his rolling gait, though perhaps not in the manner we originally planned. Tywin's pale green eyes fix on his youngest son. You have thoughts on our strategy? I have thoughts on survival, Tyrion replies, moving to the wine cabinet. Our enemies no longer fear us the way they once did. They see opportunity where once they saw only death. We must adapt or perish. And your brother? Tyrion pours wine with steady hands, though his mismatched eyes carry weight. Jaime is struggling. The man who defined himself by the sword finds himself unable to hold one. It is a difficult adjustment. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Voices raised in alarm, the sound of running feet. Kevan moves quickly to the door, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword hilt. My lord, a guard says, breathlessly. It's Sir Jaime. He attempted. The words die in the man's throat, but their meaning hangs clear. Tywin's expression doesn't change, but something cold flickers behind his eyes. Without a word, he strides from the solar. There's Tyrion close behind. They find Jaime in his chambers, pale and shaking, blood seeping from a shallow cut on his left wrist. The golden prosthetic lies on the floor beside an overturned chair, and broken glass glitters near the window where he apparently hurled his wine cup. Jaime, Tyrion says quietly, dismissing the servants with a gesture. What have you done? What I should have done weeks ago, Jaime replies, his voice hollow. The man who lived for the sword has no purpose without it. Better to end this farce cleanly. Tywin studies his son with clinical detachment. Self-pity is not becoming in a Lannister. Nor is uselessness, Jaime snaps back, some fire returning to his green eyes. Do you know what they're calling me? The Golden Stump. The crippled lion. The Kingslayer who can't even kill himself properly. They call you what you allow them to call you, Tyrion interjects, settling into a chair. But consider this, brother. You attempted to end your life with your left hand. The same hand you claim is useless. Perhaps the problem is not your physical limitations, But your mental ones. Jaime stares at his younger brother, something like understanding beginning to dawn. The old Jaime is dead, Tyrion continues. Mourn him if you must, but do not follow him into the grave. The realm needs something new, something our enemies will not expect. They prepare for the Golden Prince they have always known. What they cannot prepare for is the man you might become. Outside, ravens carry word across the Seven Kingdoms that the Great War has begun in earnest. Armies march, ships sail, and the realm bleeds. But in a chamber high in Casterly Rock, 3 Lannisters sit in council, and for the first time since the tourney ground, they begin to plan not just for survival, but for victory. The war of 4 kings and a cripple has begun, but perhaps the cripple will prove more dangerous than any of them imagine. That evening, as Tyrion prepares for his departure to command the Lannister host, he finds Jaime standing at his window, staring out at the sunset sea. The golden prosthetic gleams in the candlelight, no longer a symbol of loss, but perhaps of transformation. The men will follow you, Jaime says without turning. You have the mind for strategy that I always lacked. And you have knowledge of our enemies that I lack, Tyrion replies. Their weaknesses, their fears, their secrets. Perhaps it is time to weaponize that knowledge. You want me to become a spy? I want you to become whatever will win this war. The sword was only ever one tool among many. Now we must learn to use others. Jaime nods slowly, his reflection wavering in the dark glass. Tomorrow, Tyrion will ride to war with banners flying and horns sounding. But Jaime will fight a different kind of battle, one waged in shadows and whispers, in secrets and lies. The golden hand may be gone, but the golden mind remains. And in the days to come, their enemies will learn that a Lannister's greatest weapon was never steel at all. It was cunning. And cunning, unlike hands, can never be severed by splinters of ash wood or the cruel turns of fate. Or the morning mist clings to the green fork like a shroud as 20,000 northern swords advance toward Tyrion's carefully positioned lines. From his vantage point atop a low hill, Jaime watches through a spyglass as Roose Bolton's banners emerge from the gloom, methodical and deadly as winter itself. The northern van moves too aggressively, he observes, his golden hand steady against the bronze tube. Bolton knows better. This is meant to draw us forward. Tyrion sits his horse beside his brother, armor gleaming despite his diminutive stature. And the flanks? Jaime shifts the spyglass left and right, reading the battlefield with eyes that have studied warfare for 2 decades. Concealed, but poorly. See how the trees bend where they shouldn't? Cavalry? Now waiting for us to commit to the center. His voice grows more confident as the pieces arrange themselves in his mind. It's the same trap Robb used at the Whispering Wood, but executed by a more cautious commander. Your assessment? Fight with the van, hold the center, crush their hidden cavalry with our reserves. Jaime lowers the spyglass, meeting his brother's mismatched eyes. They expect us to charge like bulls. Instead, we think like foxes. The battle unfolds exactly as Jaime predicts. Tyrion's feint draws Bolton forward, stretching his lines thin, while concealed Lannister cavalry strikes the exposed northern flanks like hammers on anvils. What should have been a northern victory becomes a rout, with thousands of Stark bannermen fleeing back across the Green Fork in disorder. That night, in the command tent, Tyrion raises his wine cup in salute. To the mind of a lion, he says, and the other commanders echo the toast. For the first time since the tourney ground, Jaime feels something approaching satisfaction. How did you know? Asks Ser Adam Marbrand, still dusty from the chase. About the hidden cavalry, the timing, all of it. Jaime considers the question while staring into his wine. I've spent 20 years watching men fight, learning their habits, their weaknesses, their tells. I simply never applied that knowledge strategically before. He looks up, meeting the eyes of the assembled knights. When you fight with a sword, you see only the man in front of you. When you fight with your mind, you see the entire field. The victory at the Green Fork sends ripples throughout the war-torn realm. Ravens carry news that the crippled Kingslayer has somehow transformed defeat into triumph, that Tyrion Lannister commands with wisdom beyond his years, and that the Golden Lion still possesses claws after all. In King's Landing, Cersei reads the battle reports with something approaching wonder. She finds Jaime in the Red Keep's Godswood, an unlikely place for a man who has never believed in gods. He sits beneath the heart tree, its red leaves rustling in the autumn breeze, a stack of parchments spread across a stone bench. "Correspondence," she says, settling beside him. "From whom?" "Old friends, former lovers, drinking companions from a dozen tournaments." Jaime's left hand sorts through the letters with practiced efficiency. "It's remarkable how much people tell you when they think you're no longer dangerous." Cersei picks up a letter at random, scanning its contents. Lady Anya Waynwood writes of troop movements in the Vale. She says she's always admired your gentle nature and hopes you're recovering well. Lady Anya and I shared a memorable evening during the Tournament of the Twins 3 years ago. She was lonely, her husband was drunk, and I was charming. Jaime's smile holds no warmth. Now she thinks me harmless and seeks to comfort a fallen hero. Instead, she's given me the exact disposition of House Royce's knights. "And this one?" Cersei holds up another parchment. "Sodontos, Hollard, a drunk and a fool, but one who hears everything whispered in brothels and taverns. He tells me which lords grow restless, which marriages are strained, at which servants might be bought." Jaime gestures to the growing pile. 20 years of careless charm are finally bearing fruit. Cersei studies her brother with new eyes. The Golden Prince who once solved every problem with a sword has become something more subtle, more dangerous. Where once he inspired fear through reputation, now he weaves webs of information and influence. "You're building a spy network." "I'm weaponizing friendship," Jaime corrects. "Every knight I've unhorsed courteously, every lady I've danced with gallantly, every lord I've drunk with merrily. They all remember the Golden Prince who was always so very charming. Now that I'm fallen, they wish to help. And in helping me, they tell me everything." That evening, as ravens prepare to carry carefully crafted responses across the realm, Jaime meets with a visitor in the shadows of Maegor's Holdfast. Bronn emerges from the darkness, his sellsword smile sharp as his blade. "Ser Jaime," the sellsword says, inclining his head with mocking courtesy. "Heard you're looking to hire some additional consultants." "Soldiers of fortune who know the Riverlands," Jaime confirms. "Men who can move quietly, strike quickly, and disappear before anyone knows they were there." "That's a dangerous game, sir. Expensive, too." Jaime produces a purse, heavy with gold. House Lannister pays its debts, and its employees. Bronn weighs the purse in his hands, coins clinking softly. "What's the work? Harassment, interdiction, making young Wolf's supply lines vanish like morning mist." Jaime's green eyes glitter in the torchlight. "Robb Stark expects glorious battle and honorable warfare. Give him hungry men, broken supply trains, and the kind of war that legends don't sing about." "You want us to be wolves among sheep?" "I want you to be sellswords among soldiers. There's a difference between fighting for honor and fighting to eat." Within days, reports begin filtering back from the Riverlands. Stark supply convoys disappearing in the night, granaries burning without explanation, river lords finding their own small folk turning against them as gold changes hands and loyalties shift. The great northern host, so confident after their early victories, begins to slow as hunger and uncertainty spread through their ranks. Meanwhile, in the Solar at Casterly Rock, ravens arrive bearing news from across the narrow sea, where Jaime breaks the seal on a letter bearing the mark of a Pentoshi Magister, his face lighting up as he reads. "The Golden Company," he says to Tyrion, who has returned from the Green Fork flushed with victory. 10,000 seasoned fighters, available for the right price. Sellswords? The finest in the world. Exiles from Westeros, hungry for home and glory. I've been corresponding with their Captain General for weeks, playing on his nostalgia for the Seven Kingdoms. Jaime sets the letter aside with satisfaction. They'll land at Lannisport within the moon. Tyrion stares at his brother, with something approaching awe. How did you? Sir Harry Strickland fought beside me in the tournament at Lannisport 5 years ago. We spent 3 days drinking and wenching together. He always spoke of wanting to see home again. Jaime's smile turns predatory. I simply reminded him that home misses him too, and that House Lannister rewards its friends generously. The transformation is complete now, where once Jaime Lannister inspired fear through strength, now he commands respect through cunning. His golden hand may be gone, but his golden mind has proven far more valuable than steel ever was. That night, as Cersei shares his bed for the first time since the tourney, she traces the scars on his wrist with gentle fingers. "Do you miss it?" she asks softly. "The sword?" Jaime considers the question, staring at the ceiling where shadows dance in candlelight. "I miss the simplicity," he admits. "When every problem could be solved with blade work, life was cleaner. Now I see how complex the game truly is, how many pieces move on the board. And I find I'm rather good at moving them." His left hand finds hers, fingers intertwining. "The sword made me dangerous to individuals. This makes me dangerous to kingdoms." Outside their window, King's Landing sleeps uneasily under the weight of war. In the north, Robb Stark's forces struggle against supply shortages they cannot understand. Across the narrow sea, ships loaded with sellswords prepare to set sail for Lannisport, and in chambers throughout the Red Keep, ravens prepare to carry messages that will reshape alliances across the Seven Kingdoms. The mind of the lion has awakened, and the realm will never be quite the same. Where once the Golden Hand killed kings, the Golden Mind will make them. And in the great Game of Thrones, that may prove a far more lasting victory than any sword could ever achieve. The war continues, but for the first time since it began, House Lannister fights from strength rather than desperation. And that strength flows not from steel, but from the most dangerous weapon of all, intelligence wielded with purpose. The great hall of the twins echoes with the sound of Walder Frey's wheezing laughter, a sound like rusted hinges grinding against stone. The ancient lord sits hunched in his chair, his pale eyes gleaming with avarice as he studies the parchment spread before him. "So," he rasps, his voice carrying the weight of 90 years and countless grievances, "the crippled Kingslayer comes calling. How the mighty have fallen." Jaime sits across from the Lord of the Crossing, his golden hand resting motionlessly on the table, while his left hand holds a wine cup with practiced steadiness. The insult slides off him like water from mail. He has heard worse in recent months, and each slight has taught him patience, a virtue he never possessed when he could silence mockery with steel. Indeed, Lord Walder, but fallen men sometimes see the ground more clearly than those who still stand tall. Jaime's voice carries the smooth charm that once won him tournaments and ladies' favors. And from this vantage point, I see opportunities that others might miss. Opportunities? Walder's laugh turns into a coughing fit that racks his ancient frame. The young wolf already came begging for passage, promised me marriage to that bastard he calls king. What could a golden stump offer that a crown cannot? Jaime leans forward slightly, his green eyes holding the old man's gaze. Catelyn Stark promised you a royal marriage for your house. But tell me, Lord Walder, what happens to that promise when the young wolf dies in battle? When his crown becomes meaningless and his mother's word turns to wind? The wheezing stops. Walder Frey's eyes narrow, calculating and sharp despite his age. You speak treason, Kingslayer. I speak truth. Wars are won and lost by men who understand that today's king may be tomorrow's corpse. Jaime takes a measured sip of wine. House Lannister offers something more lasting than royal marriages. We offer gold, yes. But more than that, we offer memory. Memory. I remember Lord Walter. That House Frey held these bridges for 700 years, while greater lords rose and fell. I remember that your house has been mocked and dismissed by those who should show respect. Jaime's voice grows warmer, more intimate, and I remember every slight, every dismissal, every time a Stark or a Tully treated a Frey as beneath their notice. Walder's gnarled fingers drum against the arm of his chair. And what would you do with such memories? Help you collect on old debts. Help House Frey claim the respect it deserves. The Starks and Tullys have used your bridge as it suits them, paid your tolls when convenient, and ignored your counsel when it mattered. Jaime sets his cup aside, leaning back with the confidence of a man who knows he has struck the target. We offer partnership, not patronage. Alliance, not charity. The negotiation continues for hours, but the outcome is never truly in doubt. By evening, ravens fly from the twins, carrying sealed messages that will reshape the war. The crossing that should have remained loyal to the Starks now belongs to the Lannisters, bought not with gold alone, but with something far more precious, acknowledgement of old grievances and promises of future respect. That night, as Jaime prepares for the journey back to King's Landing, he finds himself reflecting on the ease of the victory. Once, he would have attributed such success to luck or his family's wealth. Now he understands that he possesses something far more valuable than either, the ability to see into men's hearts and understand what truly drives them. That the revelation comes to him fully formed as his escort makes camp beside the Green Fork. He has always been a student of human nature. 20 years of tournaments and feasts, of court intrigue and casual conversations have taught him to read desire and fear in equal measure. The Golden Prince who charmed ladies and befriended lords was unconsciously gathering intelligence on the realm's most powerful houses. Now, with his sword arm gone, that knowledge has finally found its purpose. A fortnight later, in the solar of Riverrun, Lord Edmure Tully stares in disbelief at the raven scroll in his hands. "The Freys have declared for Joffrey," he says, his voice hollow with shock. "How is that possible?" "My nephew promised them everything they could want." "Everything they thought they wanted," corrects Lord Jason Mallister, studying the implications. But apparently, the Lannisters offered them something better. The question is what? The answer comes in the form of coordinated strikes against Stark supply lines throughout the Riverlands. Frey men-at-arms, who should be guarding river crossings for the young wolf, instead ambush northern convoys with devastating efficiency. The great northern host, already strained by irregular sellsword attacks, begins to fracture as hunger and doubt spread through the ranks. Meanwhile, in the gardens of the Red Keep, another conversation unfolds that will reshape the political landscape. Lady Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns, sits beneath a flowering arbor across from Jaime Lannister, her sharp eyes studying him with obvious interest. "So you're the famous Kingslayer," she says without preamble. "Well, you look different than I expected. Less intimidating." "I find that works to my advantage these days," Jaime replies smoothly. "Intimidation is a blunt instrument. Conversation can be far more precise." "Indeed." Olenna sips her tea with delicate precision. "And what does this conversation aim to accomplish?" "Understanding. House Tyrell has remained notably neutral in recent months. That neutrality serves you well while others exhaust themselves in war. But neutrality has a cost. It prevents you from shaping the outcome. And you believe we should shape it in your favor? I believe you should shape it in the realm's favor. The Starks fight for vengeance. The Baratheon brothers fight for pride. The Greyjoys fight for glory. Only the Lannisters fight for stability." Jaime leans forward slightly. "The realm needs peace. But Lady Olenna, And peace requires winners who understand the value of mercy. The old woman's laugh is sharp as thorns. Mercy? From the man who killed a king? From the man who killed a king to save a city, Jaime corrects quietly. I have seen what happens when madness wears a crown. I would not see it happen again. Their conversation continues for hours, touching on trade routes and marriage alliances, on the price of grain and the cost of war. No agreements are reached, no promises made, but something passes between them, an understanding that House Tyrell's neutrality may not last forever. And when it ends, the Queen of Thorns will remember this conversation. As autumn deepens into winter, ravens carry intelligence gathered from across the Seven Kingdoms to Jaime's growing network. Former lovers report on troop movements. The old drinking companions share gossip that reveals political tensions, and a dozen minor lordlings who remember the Golden Prince's charm now serve as unwitting spies. The information proves its worth when Sir Stafford Lannister's urgent message reaches King's Landing. Robb Stark's forces are moving west toward Lannisport, seeking to strike at the Lannister heartland, while Tywin's main force campaigns in the Riverlands. It should be a devastating surprise attack, the kind that wins wars in a single stroke. Instead, Jaime's intelligence network has detected the movement weeks in advance. When Robb's army arrives at the Golden Tooth, they find not a lightly defended pass, but a killing ground carefully prepared by Sir Forley Prester's engineers. The surprise attack becomes a massacre, with northern forces trapped in the narrow mountain passes and systematically destroyed by Lannister crossbowmen. The news of Robb's defeat reaches King's Landing as Jaime stands with Tyrion on the battlements of the Red Keep, watching ships unload supplies in Blackwater Bay. His younger brother reads the battle report with something approaching awe. 15,000 northern soldiers, Tyrion says quietly. Destroyed because you knew they were coming before they did. Information is the deadliest weapon of all, Jaime replies, his golden hand catching the afternoon light. A sword can kill one man. The right intelligence can kill armies. That evening, as the court celebrates news of the victory, Cersei finds Jaime in his chambers. She moves with a predatory grace that reminds him of their youth, her green eyes bright with desire and admiration. You've done something remarkable, she says, her fingers tracing the scars on his wrist where flesh meets gold. The whole realm speaks of the Golden Prince's return to power. Different power, perhaps, but power nonetheless. Do they frighten you? He asks, following her gaze to the scars. No, she breathes, leaning closer. They excite me. The man who could kill with a sword was dangerous to our enemies. The man who can kill with his mind. She pauses, her lips nearly touching his ear. He's dangerous to everyone. Their passion that night burns with the intensity of resurrection, two souls finding each other again after the long winter of his despair. But it is different now, built on respect and partnership rather than desperate need. The Golden Prince has become something new, to something more dangerous than a mere warrior. In the weeks that follow, as winter settles over King's Landing and the war continues its bloody course, the transformation becomes complete. Lords who once dismissed Jaime as a pretty sellsword now seek his counsel. Servants whisper that the Queen's brother sees everything, knows everything, controls everything from his solar in the Red Keep. The irony is not lost on him. Once, men feared the golden hand that held a sword. Now they fear the golden mind that holds their secrets. And in the great game of thrones, that fear may prove more valuable than all the steel in the Seven Kingdoms. The prince who was promised political acumen has finally fulfilled his destiny, not through prophecy or magic, but through the simple recognition that the most dangerous weapon was always the one between his ears. The red sun of dawn blazes across Prince Doran Martell's private seal as Jaime breaks the wax with his left hand, his golden prosthetic gleaming in the candlelight of his solar. The letter within bears words that could reshape the entire war, written in the careful script of a man who has waited 17 years for vengeance. Your Grace, the letter begins, the death of my sister and her children has long been a wound that festers in Dawn's heart. Yet recent events suggest that House Lannister may not be the architects of that tragedy we have long believed them to be. Jaime sets the parchment aside with satisfaction. 3 months of careful correspondence, of shared intelligence about Jon Arryn's true murder, or of subtle suggestions about who truly benefited from Elya's death, have finally borne fruit. The Prince of Dawn, that patient spider in his water gardens, has begun to see the larger web of deception that has shaped the realm's recent history. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. Varys glides into the chamber with his characteristic silent grace, his hands folded within his silk sleeves. Lord Spider, Jaime says without looking up from his correspondence, come to admire my collection of letters. Come to offer congratulations, Varys replies, his voice carrying its usual honey-sweet tones. The little birds sing of remarkable achievements. Dawn stirs toward alliance, the Iron Islands waver in their rebellion, and Stannis Baratheon finds himself increasingly isolated. Such successes would be impressive even for one with intact faculties. Jaime finally looks up, meeting the eunuch's knowing gaze. You sound almost proud. I am fascinated, Varys corrects. For 20 years you wielded a sword with unmatched skill. Now you wield information with equal artistry. The transformation is instructive. And concerning to a man whose power comes from controlling information? Varys's smile is as sharp as a blade. Concerning to a man who prefers when such power serves the realm's interests. Tell me, said Jaime, what does the realm gain from your newfound talents? The question hangs in the air between them like incense, heavy with implication. Jaime considers his answer carefully, knowing that his words will determine whether the spider becomes ally or enemy. Peace, he says finally, or an end to wars that serve no purpose beyond satisfying prideful men's vanity. The realm bleeds because 5 kings cannot share power. I offer a path to reducing that number. Through assassination, through treachery, through understanding. Jaime gestures to the letters spread across his desk. Every lord has secrets. Every house has grievances. Every alliance has fractures. I simply illuminate these truths for those wise enough to see them. Their conversation is interrupted by urgent footsteps in the corridor. Tyrion enters without ceremony, his face flushed with excitement and wine in equal measure. Brother, he says breathlessly, we have word from Storm's End. Renly is dead. The news should come as a shock, but Jaime merely nods with grim satisfaction. Or the shadow that Melisandre claimed would kill the usurper. Just so. But here's the interesting part. Stannis' own followers are shaken by the manner of his brother's death. Dark magic doesn't sit well with righteous men. Tyrion settles into a chair, reaching for wine. Half his lordlings are already whispering about abandoning his cause. Jaime exchanges a meaningful look with Varys, and no doubt certain letters have already been dispatched to encourage such whispers. Letters suggesting that a man who would murder his own brother with shadow magic might not be the righteous king they thought they followed, Jaime confirms. Amazing how quickly moral certainty crumbles when faced with uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Queen Cersei holds court with a confidence that has been absent since Jaime's injury. Lords who once approached her with barely concealed disdain now offer respect that borders on deference. The change is not lost on those who watch the game closely. Your Grace, Lord Janos Slint ventures, there are reports of Stark forces massing near Harrenhal. Should we not prepare defences? Lord Stark's movements are known to us, Cersei replies smoothly. My brother's network keeps us well informed of northern intentions. We are not without resources in this conflict. The casual reference to Jaime's intelligence operations sends ripples through the assembled courtiers. The Queen speaks not of the golden hand that once enforced her will through violence, but of the golden mind that now shapes the realm's very thoughts. That evening, as ravens prepare to carry messages across the narrow sea, Jaime meets with another unlikely visitor. Captain Orane Waters, bastard of Driftmark and ambitious climber, stands before the desk where so many others have sought audience. "You sent for me, Sir Jaime." "I have a proposition, Captain. Your fleet serves Stannis from duty, not love. What if I offered you something better than duty?" Waters' eyes gleam with interest. "Such as recognition, legitimacy, a place at court that matches your abilities rather than your birth." Jaime leans back in his chair, studying the younger man's reaction. "Stannis offers righteousness and rigid adherence to law. We offer opportunity and reward for service. You're asking me to betray my king. I'm asking you to consider which king truly deserves your loyalty, the one who sees bastards as convenient tools, or the one who judges men by their accomplishments." The conversation continues deep into the night, another thread being woven into the vast tapestry of alliance and betrayal that Jaime now orchestrates with masterful precision. Far to the north, in the iron halls of Pike, another conversation unfolds that will reshape the war's direction. Balon Greyjoy sits across from his own Maester, reading reports of mainland chaos with calculating eyes. "The Golden Boy writes again," Balon mutters, studying Jaime's latest correspondence. "Offers alliance against our mutual enemies, promises to recognize Ironborn independence in exchange for support against the northern rebels." "And your response, my lord?" asks the Maester. "Caution," Balon replies, "but also interest. The mainland lords tear each other apart while we grow strong, and perhaps it is time to consider which wolves deserve to die first." The Iron Islands rebellion, once directed solely against mainland authority, begins to shift toward more selective targets. Stark supply ships burn, while Lannister merchants pass unmolested. The change is subtle but significant, another piece moving on Jaime's vast board. Back in King's Landing, Cersei finds her brother in the Godswood again, that unlikely sanctuary where he does his deepest thinking. She approaches with the quiet confidence of a woman who has rediscovered her partner's true worth. "The small council meeting was enlightening," she says, settling beside him on the stone bench. "Lord Varys actually complimented your intelligence network. From him, that's tantamount to worship." "Varys understands power," Jaime replies, not looking up from the letter he's composing. He sees that fear of the sword has been replaced by something more subtle, but no less effective. And what is that? Fear of exposure. Every lord in the Seven Kingdoms has secrets they would kill to protect, when they know that someone else holds those secrets. He trails off, letting her complete the thought. They become very cooperative. Indeed. Jaime seals the letter with crimson wax, pressing his signet ring into the warm surface. Jon Arryn's murder, Lysa's madness, Littlefinger's manipulations, all threads in a web that I'm slowly untangling, and each thread revealed gives us leverage over another house, another alliance, another potential enemy turned ally. Cersei studies her brother's profile in the moonlight, filtering through the heart tree's leaves. Oh, this is a different man than the one who lost his hand in a tourney ground. Where once there was arrogance bred of physical supremacy, now there is confidence born of intellectual mastery. "Do you miss it?" she asks softly. "The simplicity of the sword?" "Sometimes," he admits, "but I've discovered something interesting. The sword could only make enemies fear me. This makes them need me. Fear fades when the feared man is no longer present. Need endures." A raven caws overhead, black wings cutting through the night sky as it carries another message to another lord, another carefully crafted manipulation designed to shift the balance of power. The game behind the throne continues. But now it is played by rules that Jaime Lannister has written himself. In the days that follow, the fruits of his labors become increasingly apparent. Stannis' support continues to erode as his followers abandon a cause tainted by dark magic and fratricide. Dawn sends envoys to King's Landing for the first time since Robert's rebellion. The Iron Islands rebellion becomes increasingly selective in its targets, focusing on northern shipping while leaving Lannister interests largely untouched. Most significantly, ravens begin arriving from river lords who have grown tired of the young wolf's costly war. Lord Titus Blackwood, despite his family's ancient enmity with the Brackens, writes of his concerns about Robb's increasingly desperate strategies. Lady Shella Went, holding the ruins of Harrenhal, hints at her willingness to consider new allegiances if certain guarantees could be made. The great alliance that should have swept the Lannisters from power begins to show cracks, to hairline fractures that Jaime's careful pressure steadily widens. Where once House Lannister stood alone against a realm in arms, now they find themselves at the center of an increasingly complex web of relationships that serves their interests above all others. The Golden Hand may be gone, but the Golden Mind has proven far more dangerous than steel ever was. In the great Game of Thrones, Jaime Lannister has discovered that the most effective weapon is not the blade that cuts down enemies, but the intelligence that turns enemies into allies before they ever realize they have changed sides. The morning sun burns crimson through the smoke rising from Blackwater Bay as Stannis Baratheon's war fleet darkens the horizon like a forest of masts and sails. From the battlements of the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister watches the approaching armada through his spyglass, his golden hand steady against the bronze, while his mind calculates angles, currents, and the precise timing that will determine whether King's Landing stands or falls. 200 ships, Tyrion observes, joining his brother at the wall. More than we expected. Fewer than we prepared for, Jaime replies, lowering the glass. His green eyes hold the confidence of a man who has spent weeks orchestrating this moment. Captain Davos commands the van, Lord Velaryon holds the center, and Sir Imry Florent brings up the rear, exactly as our sources promised. Tyrion raises an eyebrow. Sources. Orain Waters finally chose his side. His last message arrived yesterday, detailing Stannis' battle plan with admirable precision. Jaime's smile is cold as winter steel. Dead amazing how informative a man becomes when he believes his future lies with the winners rather than the righteous. Below them, King's Landing writhes with organized chaos. Thousands of small folk flee inland while the Goldcloaks take positions along the river walls. In the harbor, Tyrion's modified fishing boats bob at anchor, their holds packed with wildfire and crewed by men who understand they sail to glory or the grave in equal measure. But the true preparations have been invisible, conducted through ravens and whispered conversations in darkened chambers. The Battle of Blackwater will be won not by the sharpest swords or the bravest hearts, but by the most complete understanding of every piece on the board. The Tyrell host, Jaime asks, 20 miles south and advancing exactly as promised. Lord Mace received your final message this morning. The promise of Margaery's marriage to the king proved persuasive. And our other arrangements. Tyrion's grin is sharp as a blade. Captain Saladhor Syan's pirates will discover that their promised payment was a lie. Sir Axel Florent will find his supply lines mysteriously severed, and Lord Celtigar will learn that his family's ancient loyalty to Dragonstone carries a price he may not wish to pay. The battle begins with the thunder of wildfire erupting across the bay. Tyrion's trap springs perfectly, catching Stannis' fleet as it attempts to navigate the narrow channel. Ships explode in gouts of green flame, while others burn like torches against the morning sky. The carefully planned assault dissolves into chaos as captains struggle to maintain formation amid the inferno. But Jaime's true masterstroke reveals itself in the aftermath. As Stannis' remaining ships fight to reach shore, his carefully cultivated network within the enemy force begins its work. Captains who should press their advantage instead hesitate, looking to commanders who no longer respond to signals. Supply ships that should bring fresh arrows and replacement weapons instead drift unmanned, their crews mysteriously absent. "Now," Jaime says quietly, and Tyrion signals the trumpeters. The second phase of the battle unfolds with mechanical precision. The gold cloaks, reinforced by Lannister men-at-arms who arrived in the night disguised as refugees, emerge from prepared positions to strike Stannis' landing forces. What should have been a coordinated assault becomes a series of isolated engagements, as Jaime's intelligence allows the defenders to strike each enemy force at its weakest point. In the throne room, Queen Cersei paces like a caged lioness, her green eyes bright with terror despite her brother's assurances. Each crash of steel on steel, each distant explosion, sends tremors through her carefully maintained composure. "He promised," she whispers to herself. "Jaime promised we would win." The great doors burst open as a messenger rushes in, his face streaked with soot and blood. "Your Grace, Stannis has landed. His men storm the mud gate." Cersei's face goes white as milk, but before panic can take hold, another voice cuts through the chaos. "And they die there," Jaime says, entering with calm confidence. His golden hand gleams in the torchlight as he approaches the throne. Sir Mandon Pike holds the gate with 500 men who know exactly where to position themselves. Every stone thrown, every ladder raised, every assault launched by Stannis' forces has been anticipated and prepared for. How can you be certain? Because I wrote the script they're following. Jaime produces a scroll from his cloak, unrolling it to reveal detailed battle plans marked with enemy positions. Captain Waters provided Stannis' complete strategy 3 days ago. We know where every attack will fall, when every reserve will commit, and how every commander will react when his plans go awry. The truth of his words becomes apparent as the afternoon wears on. Each assault Stannis launches breaks against prepared defenses like waves against stone. Of the Mudgate holds despite overwhelming pressure. The river walls repel landing after landing, and throughout the battle, Stannis' own forces seem to work against themselves, with crucial orders arriving late and essential supplies never reaching the men who need them most. The final act begins as evening approaches, and the sound of horns echoes from the south. Lord Tywin Lannister's banners appear on the horizon, but they are not alone. Beside the golden lions of Casterly Rock fly the green roses of Highgarden, 20,000 fresh troops arriving at the moment of maximum impact. "The Tyrells," Cersei breathes, her terror transforming into wonder. "They came." "They were always going to come," Jaime replies. "The question was when, and on whose side? Lady Olenna is many things, but she is not foolish enough to back a losing cause. And I made certain she understood which cause would lose. Stannis' defeat becomes a rout as the combined Lannister-Tyrell host crashes into his exhausted forces like a hammer on an anvil. Men who have fought all day against impossible odds break and flee when faced with fresh enemies appearing from an unexpected direction. The righteous king's great gamble collapses in blood and fire, his dreams of justice drowning in Blackwater Bay along with his ships. That night, as King's Landing celebrates its deliverance, Jaime stands once again on the Red Keep's battlements. The bay burns with the wreckage of Stannis' fleet, while the city below rings with songs and laughter. Lords who arrived expecting to defend a doomed city instead toast the architect of an impossible victory. Tyrion finds him there, a wine cup in hand and admiration clear in his mismatched eyes. "Brother, I owe you an apology. When you lost your hand, I thought we had lost our greatest weapon. I was wrong." "Were you?" "Completely. The golden hand was impressive, but it was just steel and flesh in the end. This—" Tyrion gestures toward the burning bay, toward the celebrating city, toward the victory that seemed impossible just hours before. "This is something else entirely. You didn't just win a battle today. You orchestrated a masterpiece. Jaime considers this. His golden prosthetics are catching the light of distant fires. The sword could only defeat the men in front of me. But the mind... He pauses, watching smoke rise from the water. The mind can defeat men who think they're on your side. Later, in the privacy of her chambers, Cersei comes to him with desire and respect warring in her green eyes. She traces the scars on his wrist where flesh meets gold, her touch reverent as a prayer. "They're calling you the savior of King's Landing," she whispers, "the golden mind who turned certain defeat into glorious victory." "And what do you call me?" "Mine," she breathes against his ear. "My brother, my lover, my partner in all things, the man who proved that the most dangerous weapon was never the one you held in your hand." Their embrace carries the passion of shared triumph, two souls united not just by blood and desire, but by the recognition of what they have accomplished together. The Golden Prince, who once defined himself by physical prowess, has become something far more formidable, a master of the great game who moves pieces across the board of nations with the same skill he once brought to swordplay. In the days that follow, as ravens carry news of Stannis' defeat across the Seven Kingdoms, one truth becomes clear to all who witness it. Jaime Lannister's greatest victory was not won with Oathkeeper or any blade, but with the weapon that had always been his most dangerous, his mind, finally freed from the arrogance that once clouded it. The Golden Hand may have been lost to splinters and steel, but the Golden Mind has proven more valuable than all the swords in the Seven Kingdoms. And in the great Game of Thrones, that mind has just written its masterpiece in smoke and flame across the waters of Blackwater Bay. Or the Battle of Blackwater is won. But more than that, it has demonstrated to the realm that House Lannister's power was never truly dependent on fear of the sword. It was always built on something more enduring. The intelligence to see opportunities where others see only obstacles, and the will to seize those opportunities with ruthless precision. The war continues, but its outcome is no longer in doubt. The Golden Mind has awakened, and the Seven Kingdoms will never be quite the same. The Great Hall of the Red Keep has never hosted such a gathering of humbled lords. 3 days after the Battle of Blackwater, the nobility of the Seven Kingdoms come to bend the knee, not just to King Joffrey, but to the man who saved his throne through cunning rather than steel. Jaime Lannister sits at the high table, his golden hand catching the morning light as ravens continue arriving with news from across the realm. Lord Mace Tyrell approaches the throne with ponderous dignity, his son Sir Loras beside him, wearing a cloak of green and gold. The Knight of Flowers, the same man whose shattered lance had destroyed Jaime's sword hand, now looks upon his former victim with something approaching awe. "Your Grace," Mace declares, his voice booming across the hall. "House Tyrell pledges renewed loyalty to the Iron Throne. The roses of Highgarden bloom in service to House Baratheon of King's Landing." "House Lannister of King's Landing," Joffrey corrects petulantly, but his words carry less weight than they once did. The boy king increasingly finds his authority managed by others, his worst impulses contained by careful manipulation and political necessity. Jaime rises from his seat, moving with the quiet confidence that has replaced his old arrogance. "Lord Mace, your arrival at the crucial moment secured victory for the realm." Such loyalty deserves recognition. He produces a scroll sealed with royal wax. "His Grace names you Master of Coin, replacing Lord Baelish in that position." The dismissal of Littlefinger sends ripples through the assembled court. The man who has manipulated crown finances for years now finds himself supplanted by a house whose grain feeds half the realm. Peter Baelish himself stands near the back of the hall, his cat's smile unchanged, but his pale green eyes calculating new angles of approach. "Your Grace is most generous," Mace replies, accepting the scroll with obvious pleasure. "Your House Tyrell shall serve faithfully." But it is the next announcement that truly transforms the political landscape. Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King, steps forward with the measured dignity of a man who has served the realm for decades. "Your Grace," he says formally, "age and the burdens of office weigh heavily upon these shoulders. I would beg leave to return to Casterly Rock, that I might spend my remaining years in service to our ancestral seat." The hall falls silent. Tywin's resignation as Hand is unexpected, but those who understand the game recognize the deeper currents. The old lion steps aside to make room for the new, acknowledging that his son has proven himself capable of wielding power in ways even he hadn't anticipated. "If you must go, grandfather," Joffrey says, his voice showing rare maturity, "then I name Sir Jaime Lannister as your successor. Let the savior of King's Landing serve as Hand of the King." The appointment sends shockwaves through the realm's power structure. The Golden Prince, once dismissed as a pretty face with a sharp sword, now holds the second most powerful position in the Seven Kingdoms. But unlike previous Hands, who ruled through force or fear, Jaime's authority stems from demonstrated competence and the grudging respect of those he has outmaneuvered. Lord Varys approaches later that evening, finding Jaime in the Hand's tower, reviewing reports from his growing network of correspondence. The spider moves with his characteristic silent grace, settling into a chair without invitation. "Lord Hand," he says, the title carrying unusual weight from his honey-sweet voice. A remarkable transformation. From Kingslayer to King's Savior in the span of a year. From your perspective, perhaps. From mine, I have simply discovered abilities that were always present. Jaime sets aside a letter from the north, where Robb Stark's rebellion continues, despite his increasing isolation. "Was there something you required, Lord Varys?" "Understanding. For 20 years I have served as the realm's primary gatherer of information. Now I find that role shared." The admission hangs between them like a challenge. Jaime meets Varys's gaze steadily, recognizing the delicate negotiation that must now unfold. "The realm is large enough for multiple sources of information," Jaime says carefully. "What matters is ensuring that information serves the Crown's interests above all others." Indeed. And those interests are peace, stability, and an end to wars that serve no purpose beyond feeding pride and ambition. Jaime leans back in his chair. "Tell me, Lord Varys, what do your little birds sing of Robb Stark's position?" The question is both test and invitation. Varys considers his response with visible calculation. The young wolf grows desperate. His southern campaign has failed, his western offensive was shattered, and his supply lines face constant harassment. Lords who once flocked to his banners now whisper of making peace. The eunuch pauses meaningfully. "Some have already begun private correspondence with King's Landing." "Correspondence that you have facilitated?" "Correspondence that serves the realm's need for peace." Varys's smile is sharp as a blade. "It appears we seek similar outcomes, Lord Hand. Perhaps cooperation would serve us both." Their agreement, our unspoken but understood, marks another shift in the game's landscape. The Spider and the Golden Mind, working in concert rather than opposition, create an intelligence network of unprecedented scope and effectiveness. Meanwhile, in the north, the fruits of their cooperation begin to show. Ravens arrive at Winterfell bearing messages that shake the very foundations of Robb's rebellion. Lord Roose Bolton writes privately of his concerns about continued warfare. Lady Dustin questions the wisdom of southern campaigns when winter approaches. Even the Karstarks, bound by blood and grief, begin to wonder if vengeance is worth the price in northern lives. The isolation becomes more apparent when envoys from Dorne arrive in King's Landing, not as enemies or neutral parties, but as potential allies seeking accommodation with the winning side. The Prince Doran's representative, Sir Daemon Sund, requests private audience with the Hand to discuss matters of mutual interest. "Dorne remembers old grievances," Daemon says carefully, seated across from Jaime in the Hand Solar. But Dawn also recognizes new realities. The realm requires peace, and peace requires understanding. Understanding of what nature? Jaime asks, though he suspects the answer. That some injustices were born of circumstances beyond any single house's control. That blame, long nurtured, might be better set aside in favor of cooperation. The Dornish knight leans forward slightly. My prince is prepared to discuss marriage alliances, trade agreements, and other bonds that might heal old wounds. The negotiation that follows spans several days, but its conclusion reshapes the political map of Westeros. To Dawn, the kingdom that stood apart since Robert's rebellion, begins the slow process of reintegration with the rest of the realm. Not through conquest or coercion, but through careful diplomacy and mutual benefit. Yet even as alliances form and enemies become partners, new challenges emerge. The faith of the Seven, long compliant to royal authority, begins to stir with discontent. The High Septon requests audience with the Hand, his aging face grave with concern. The realm celebrates victory through bloodshed and deception, he says, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority. The faith grows troubled by the methods employed to secure this peace. Jaime receives the rebuke with careful attention, recognizing another form of power that must be managed rather than confronted. Holy Father, the faith teaches that peace is a blessing from the Seven. Surely the methods matter less than the outcome. The methods shape the men who employ them, the High Septon replies. A throne built on lies and manipulation will find itself forever threatened by the same. The conversation continues for hours, touching on theology and statecraft, on the balance between moral purity and practical governance. No agreements are reached, but understanding develops. The faith will maintain its neutrality, so long as the crown respects religious authority and avoids the worst excesses of tyranny. That evening, as Jaime reviews reports from across the Seven Kingdoms, Cersei finds him in his solar. The Queen has changed since Blackwater, carrying herself with renewed confidence, born of seeing her brother's true capabilities. Not the lords speak of you differently now, she observes, settling into the chair Varys had occupied hours earlier. Not as the Golden Prince or the Kingslayer, but as the mind of the Lion, the man who sees all and knows all. I know what people choose to tell me, Jaime corrects, and I understand how to use that information effectively. The same thing, in the end. Cersei's smile holds warmth and pride in equal measure. Do you realize what you've accomplished? You've made House Lannister stronger than our father ever dreamed, not through gold or fear, but through something more lasting, respect born of competence. She is right, though Jaime is reluctant to claim such victory while challenges remain. Robb Stark still holds the north, Stannis still plots from Dragonstone, the Iron Islands continue their sporadic rebellion. And beneath the surface of apparent stability, ambitious men like Baelish calculate new approaches to power. But for the first time since his injury, Jaime allows himself to feel satisfaction. The golden hand may be gone, but the golden mind has proven more valuable than any sword. The Game of Thrones continues, but now he plays it from a position of strength rather than desperation. Outside his window, King's Landing sleeps peacefully for the first time in months. The realm has been reshaped not through conquest, but through understanding, not through violence, but through intelligence. And at the center of it all sits a man who discovered that losing what defined him allowed him to become something far more dangerous than he ever imagined possible. If the price of victory has been paid in careful planning and patient manipulation, rather than blood and gold. And that price, Jaime reflects, as he prepares for another day of correspondence and negotiation, has proven remarkably affordable for a lion who learned to hunt with his mind instead of his claws. The wind from the north carries the scent of winter and desperation as Robb Stark stands atop the walls of River Run, watching his kingdom crumble one desertion at a time. Below in the castle yard, barely 3,000 men remain of the mighty host that once marched south with such confidence. The banners that fly are few: stark direwolves, tully trout, and the scattered remnants of houses that have nowhere left to turn. "Another raven from the Fries," Catelyn says, approaching her son with weariness etched in every line of her face. Or Lord Walder formally renounces his oath to House Stark. He cites changed circumstances. Robb's jaw tightens as he takes the parchment, though he barely glances at the words within. He has heard similar missives for weeks now. The Umbers have withdrawn to protect their own lands. The Mormonts speak of Ironborn raids requiring their attention. Even the Karstarks, bound by blood and vengeance, have begun to question whether continued war serves the North's interests. "How many does that leave us?" he asks, though he knows the answer will bring no comfort. "Perhaps 24 houses still answering our calls." "The rest?" Catelyn's voice trails off, carrying the weight of a mother watching her son's dreams die. "The rest speak privately of making peace." The isolation is complete now. A masterpiece of political warfare orchestrated from King's Landing with surgical precision. Every alliance fractured, every support pillar removed, every hope of victory extinguished not through battle but through the patient application of intelligence and understanding. The young wolf finds himself exactly where Jaime Lannister intended, with no choice but to treat or face annihilation. That evening, as autumn rains lash against Riverrun's ancient stones, unexpected guests arrive under a banner of parley. The party is small but significant. Jaime Lannister himself, accompanied only by 12 knights and riding under the protection of guest right. The man who once inspired terror through martial prowess now commands attention through something far more dangerous: the reputation of one who sees everything and forgets nothing. Robb receives them in Riverrun's great hall, the same chamber where his grandfather, Lord Hoster, once held court in better days. The young wolf sits straight-backed in the high seat, trying to project strength despite the dire circumstances. Beside him, Catelyn watches the golden-handed man who has orchestrated their downfall with something approaching fascination. "Ser Jaime," Robb says formally, his voice steady despite everything. "You come under guest right. You are welcome in these halls." Jaime inclines his head with courteous respect. Gone is the arrogant smirk that once defined his features, replaced by the measured dignity of a man who has learned to wield power through wisdom rather than fear. "Your Grace, thank you for receiving me." The title hangs in the air between them, a small acknowledgement of Robb's claimed kingship, a gesture of respect that costs nothing but means everything. Around the hall, northern lords shift uncomfortably, unsure how to interpret this unexpected courtesy from their greatest enemy. "You come to demand surrender?" asks Lord Edmure Tully, his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "To gloat over our misfortunes?" "I come to offer terms," Jaime replies calmly, "terms that serve both the North's honor and the realm's need for peace." The negotiation that follows spans 3 days, conducted not in the harsh language of ultimatums, but in the careful dance of diplomacy between men who understand that both sides have something to lose. Jaime demonstrates the same mastery of political warfare that has served him so well in recent months, but here it is tempered by something unexpected, genuine respect for his opponents. "Or the North has suffered enough," he says, during a private moment with Robb and Catelyn, the 3 of them alone in Lord Hoster's solar. More war serves no one's interests, least of all the small folk who pay the price for their lord's ambitions. "Spoken like a man who has never loved anything more than his own reputation," Catelyn replies sharply. "What would you know of a mother's grief?" Jaime meets her eyes steadily, his golden hand resting motionless on the table between them. "I know that grief can drive good people to make terrible choices. I know because I have made them myself." The admission surprises them both. This is not the Jaime Lannister they remember. Not the arrogant young knight who threw children from windows or the golden prince who cared only for his sister's bed. This man carries weight, understanding, and something that might even be wisdom. Your son Brandon's fall was an accident, he continues quietly. A moment of panic, a choice made in desperate fear. I have carried that guilt every day since, knowing that my actions set in motion the chain of events that led to your husband's death. Catelyn's breath catches, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. The admission she has waited years to hear comes not as vindication, but as the foundation for something more important: reconciliation. The realm cannot afford more blood, Jaime continues. Not when winter approaches, not when threats gather beyond our borders. The North deserves to remain under Stark rule, but as part of a united kingdom rather than a realm divided. The terms he offers are generous beyond anything Robb dared hope for. The North will remain under Stark governance, with Robb acknowledged as warden rather than king. All northern prisoners will be freed, all seized lands restored, all debts of war forgiven. In exchange, the rebellion ends, the North acknowledges Joffrey's rule, and the realm unites to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And if we refuse, Robb asks, though he already knows the answer, then winter comes to a divided kingdom, and we all suffer for it. Jaime's voice carries no threat, only the weight of inevitable consequence. Your choices are your own, Your Grace. I merely hope they serve your people's welfare above your pride. On the final day, as northern lords gather to hear their king's decision, Jaime produces an object that sends gasps through the assembled crowd. Ice, the ancestral sword of House Stark, gleams in his left hand as he presents it formally to Robb. This belongs to House Stark, he says simply. It should return home. The gesture is more than symbolic. It is a recognition of legitimacy, a statement that the Starks remain one of the great houses of Westeros, regardless of how this rebellion ends. Lords who had prepared for humiliation instead witness something approaching honor between former enemies. Robb accepts the blade with hands that barely tremble, though whether from emotion or exhaustion, only he can say. You surprise me, Ser Jaime. When we last met, I thought I knew exactly what manner of man you were. When we last met, I thought the same of myself. Jaime's smile holds no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of a man who has found peace with his choices. War has a way of revealing truths we never expected to face. The ceremony that follows is not a surrender, but something more complex, a recognition that the realm requires unity more than it requires victory. Robb formally renounces his claim to kingship while maintaining his dignity and his people's respect. Northern lords bend the knee, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement that sometimes wisdom lies in knowing when to end a fight. That evening, as preparations begin for the Northern Lord's journey home, Catelyn finds Jaime standing alone on River Run's battlements, looking out over the rivers that have seen so much blood and strife. You could have destroyed us completely, she says, joining him at the wall. Your father would have. My father never learned that some victories cost more than defeat, Jaime replies. Or the realm needs the North strong and loyal, not broken and resentful. What good is a kingdom built on graves? And what of justice? What of punishment for those who rebelled against their rightful king? Jaime considers this, his golden hand catching the light of torches, flickering in the gathering dusk. Justice without mercy is just another form of tyranny. The realm has seen enough of that. The conversation continues as night settles over the riverlands. Two people who have every reason to hate each other, instead finding common ground in their desire for a better future. When it ends, something has changed, not just between them, but in the very nature of how power might be wielded in Westeros. The next morning brings farewells that feel more like the conclusion of an honored rivalry than the end of a bitter war. Robb and Jaime clasp hands as equals, former enemies who have found a path towards something that might eventually become friendship. The North remembers Ser Jaime, Robb says, but his words carry gratitude rather than threat. And the South honors that memory, Jaime replies. May we never have cause to draw swords against each other again. As the Northern Army begins its long march home, banners flying and dignity intact, Jaime watches from Riverrun's gates with satisfaction that has nothing to do with military victory. This is something rarer and more valuable, a peace built on mutual respect rather than mutual exhaustion. The War of the Five Kings is ending not with a whimper, but with wisdom, not with the crushing of enemies, but with their transformation into something that might eventually become allies. The golden hand that once killed kings has been replaced by the golden mind that saves them, and in that transformation, the realm itself begins to heal. The young wolf's last roar echoes not in defiance, but in acknowledgement that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to stop fighting. And in that acknowledgement, the true victory is won, not for any single house or cause, but for the realm itself, and all who call it home. The small council chamber has never hosted such an unusual assembly of advisers. Where once sat lords chosen for their swords or their gold, now gather men and women selected for their minds and their understanding of the realm's true needs. Jaime Lannister, Hand of the King, presides over this transformation with the quiet satisfaction of an architect watching his greatest work take shape. The northern lords have returned to their holdings peacefully, reports Grandmaster Pycelle, though his voice carries none of its former obsequious tone. The old man has learned to respect competence over flattery, adapting to a small council that values information over empty courtesy. Lord Stark's ravens speak of gratitude for the crown's mercy and promises of loyal service. Jaime nods, making notes with his left hand while his golden prosthetic rests motionless on the table's polished surface. And the Riverlands. Rebuilding, answers Lord Mace Tyrell, now master of coin in place of the dismissed Littlefinger. The harvest promises to be good, trade routes are reopening, and the lords speak more of planting than of warfare. The transformation extends beyond mere personnel changes. The very nature of governance has shifted under Jaime's guidance, from a system built on fear and intimidation to one founded on information and mutual benefit. Ravens arrive daily, bearing intelligence from across the Seven Kingdoms, but also carrying messages of cooperation, trade agreements, and the slow work of healing a realm torn by war. What news from across the narrow sea? Jaime asks, turning to Varys. The spider has proven himself invaluable in this new order, his network of little birds now serving the crown's interests without reservation. The Dragon Queen continues her conquests in Slaver's Bay, Varys reports, his honeyed voice carrying careful neutrality. Meereen has fallen, though reports suggest she faces considerable challenges in governing her new territories. Jaime exchanges a meaningful look with Tyrion, who has returned to King's Landing to serve as Master of Laws. The youngest Lannister brother has proven essential to this new form of governance, his sharp mind complementing Jaime's strategic vision and Cersei's political instincts, challenges that we have helped to illuminate for local leaders, Tyrion adds with a slight smile. Amazing how many former slaves discover they have grievances when properly informed of their options. The conversation touches on what has become Jaime's greatest innovation, the transformation of espionage from a tool of destruction into an instrument of construction. Where once spies gathered information to destroy enemies, now they work to build relationships, facilitate trade, and prevent conflicts before they can begin. The faith grows restless again, warns Sir Kevan Lannister, who has remained in King's Landing to serve as Master of Ships. The High Septon speaks of moral decay in the royal court. Then we arrange a meeting, Jaime replies calmly. The faith serves the realm's spiritual needs, just as we serve its temporal ones. Better to address concerns before they become grievances. This approach, treating potential opponents as partners in governance rather than enemies to be crushed, has become the hallmark of Jaime's rule as Hand. The great houses that once plotted rebellion now compete for royal favor through service rather than scheming. The faith, rather than being ignored or persecuted, finds its voice heard in matters of justice and mercy. That evening, as the small council disperses to their various duties, Jaime finds himself alone in the Hand's tower with Cersei, or the Queen has changed as much as anyone in this transformation, evolving from a woman who wielded power through beauty and manipulation into one who commands respect through intelligence and political acumen. The Dornish envoy departs tomorrow, she reports, settling into the chair across from his desk. Prince Doran's terms are acceptable. A royal progress through Dorne within the year, recognition of their unique customs, and a marriage alliance between House Martell and a suitable noble house. Not House Lannister? Jaime asks with a slight smile. Not House Lannister. Doran is many things, but he is not foolish enough to bind his house so closely to ours that others might question his independence. Cersei's answering smile holds both warmth and respect. He prefers the appearance of negotiated accommodation to obvious subjugation. Wise of him, and wise of us to allow it. Their partnership has become the foundation upon which this new order rests. Where once their relationship was built primarily on physical desire and shared secrets, now it encompasses genuine intellectual collaboration. Cersei's understanding of courtly dynamics complements Jaime's strategic vision, while both benefit from Tyrion's sharp wit and careful planning. There is something else, Cersei says, her voice dropping to the intimate tone reserved for matters of the highest sensitivity. Ravens from Bravos. The Iron Bank inquires about the Crown's debts. Jaime sets down his quill, giving her his full attention. The Iron Bank of Bravos has been one of the few external threats beyond his immediate control, a source of potential instability that could undermine everything they have built. What does Tyrion say? That we can negotiate from a position of strength for the first time in years. The realm prospers, trade flourishes, and tax collection has improved dramatically now that lords compete for royal favor rather than planning rebellion. Cersei leans forward slightly. He believes we can renegotiate the terms entirely, possibly even turning debt into investment opportunity. Another problem transformed into a partnership. Just so. Their conversation is interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Tyrion enters without ceremony, wine cup in hand, and expression unusually serious. Forgive the intrusion, but we have received interesting intelligence from Meereen, he says, settling into a third chair. It seems the Dragon Queen faces a rebellion of former masters, while her freed slaves prove less grateful than she anticipated for liberation that comes with foreign occupation. Jaime considers this information, seeing immediately how it fits into the larger pattern of their strategy. Our gold and our agents have been well spent, it would seem. Indeed, the fascinating thing is that we have accomplished this not through direct opposition, but simply by providing information. Former slaves learning they have choices beyond following the Dragon Queen. Former masters discovering that resistance might be more profitable than submission. And local merchants realizing that Westerosi trade offers better terms than forced compliance with foreign conquest. The mind-shaping events across the world without a single sword being drawn, Cersei observes with obvious admiration. The irony is not lost on any of them. Jaime, who once believed that every problem could be solved with steel and strength, has created a form of power more far-reaching than any army. His influence now extends from the Wall to the Summer Isles, not through conquest, but through the patient cultivation of relationships and the strategic application of knowledge. Later that night, as Jaime stands on the battlements of the Red Keep, looking out over a peaceful King's Landing, He reflects on the journey that has brought him to this moment. The golden hand lies forgotten in a chest somewhere, replaced by something far more valuable, the understanding that true power comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build. "You have accomplished something remarkable," a voice says behind him. Jaime turns to find Sir Barristan Selmy approaching, the old knight's white cloak pristine in the moonlight. "Have I?" "You have given the realm something it has rarely known. Peace born of justice rather than exhaustion. Lords who serve willingly rather than from fear. A crown that rules through wisdom rather than intimidation." Barristan joins him at the wall, looking out over the sleeping city. "In my long years of service, I have seen many approaches to kingship. This may be the finest. The kingship belongs to His grace, but I merely serve as His hand. You serve as much more than that." The old knight's voice carries the weight of decades of observation. "You have become what every hand should aspire to be, not merely the king's sword, but his conscience and his wisdom combined." They stand in comfortable silence, two men who have seen the realm at its worst, and now witness it at something approaching its best. Below them, King's Landing sleeps peacefully, its streets safe, and its people hopeful for the first time in years. "Do you ever wonder," Barristan asks quietly, "what might have happened if you hadn't lost your hand?" Jaime considers this, his golden prosthetic gleaming in the pale moonlight. "Every day. But I have come to believe that sometimes our greatest losses become our greatest gains, if we have the wisdom to see them clearly." "And what do you see when you look back on that day?" "The death of a man who thought he knew what strength meant," Jaime replies, "and the birth of one who learned that true power was never about the sword at all. In the distance, a raven caws as it wings its way across the night sky, carrying another message to another lord in the great network of communication that has replaced the old system of threats and intimidation. The Golden Mind Ascendant has created something unprecedented in the history of Westeros, a kingdom that grows stronger through cooperation rather than conquest, that prospers through wisdom rather than war. The transformation is complete now, not just of Jaime Lannister, but of the realm itself. And in that transformation, perhaps, lies the true fulfillment of prophecies that spoke not of princes who would bring fire and blood, but of those who would bring peace and prosperity to a land that had known far too little of either. The golden hand may be gone, but the golden mind has proven more valuable than any weapon ever forged, and in the years to come, that mind will continue to shape not just kingdoms, but the very nature of how power might be wielded for the good of all, rather than the few. 5 years have passed since the end of the War of 5 Kings, and the 7 kingdoms have never known such prosperity. From the walls of Winterfell to the shadows of the Red Mountains, from the Iron Islands to the reaches of Dawn, the realm flourishes under a peace built not on exhaustion, but on wisdom. Trade routes bustle with merchants. Harvests grow fat in fields unmarked by war, and children learn letters instead of swordplay in schools that dot the landscape like flowers after rain. In the Hand's Tower of the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister sits before a great window that looks out over King's Landing, his golden prosthetic catching the morning light as his left hand moves steadily across parchment. At 43, silver threads his golden hair and lines mark his green eyes, but his mind remains as sharp as the blade he once wielded with such deadly precision. "My Lord Hand," his secretary says quietly from the doorway. "The delegation from the Citadel has arrived for their appointment." Jaime sets down his quill and flexes the fingers of his left hand, feeling the familiar ache that comes from hours of writing. The memoirs grow longer each day, or chronicling not just his own transformation, but the rebirth of an entire kingdom. "Send them in, Sir Davos, and bring wine, the good Dornish red. Today's discussions will require clear minds and comfortable throats. The delegation that enters represents something unprecedented in the history of Westeros, an alliance between political power and intellectual pursuits that has revolutionized how knowledge spreads throughout the realm. Archmaester Walgrave leads them, but he is accompanied by figures who would have seemed impossible years ago. A former sellsword who has become the realm's finest cartographer, a bastard girl from Flea Bottom who discovered a gift for mathematics, and Lord Samwell Tarly, who has proven that courage comes in many forms. "Your Grace," Walgrave says formally, though the title carries warmth rather than mere protocol. The expansion proceeds ahead of schedule, 12 new schools in the Riverlands alone, with more planned for the north before winter sets in fully. And the curriculum? Reading, writing, sums, history, and, as you requested, the arts of information gathering and analysis. We teach children not just what to think, but how to think. The old Archmeister's eyes gleam with satisfaction. The results exceed our most optimistic projections. This is Jaime's greatest legacy, not the wars won or the enemies defeated, but the minds awakened across a realm that had too long valued sword arms over sharp wits. In every town and village, bright children, who might once have been doomed to lives of ignorance, now learn to read, to reason, to see connections and possibilities that their parents never dreamed existed. The Northern Lords adapt well to the new methods? Jaime asks, knowing the answer but enjoying the confirmation. Lord Stark himself wrote to express his amazement, Sam Tarly interjects, his confidence a far cry from the stammering boy who once fled his father's castle. He says that Bran has taken to the diplomatic protocols with such enthusiasm that he may have found his true calling. The boy dreams of serving as an envoy to the free cities when he comes of age. Jaime smiles at this news. The Stark boy who fell from a tower, pushed by a golden prince who thought only with his sword, now soars through the realm of ideas and possibilities. There is poetry in such redemption, a balance that even the gods might appreciate. Later that afternoon, or as the delegation departs with purses full of gold and heads full of new plans, Jaime receives a different sort of visitor. Tyrion enters with his characteristic rolling gait, but his face carries the satisfaction of a man whose talents have finally found their proper outlet. "Brother," he says, settling into his favorite chair with a cup of wine, "I bring news from across the narrow sea. Our investments continue to bear fruit. The Dragon Queen still rules in Meereen, after a fashion, but her empire grows smaller each month as cities rediscover the benefits of self-governance and profitable trade relationships. Amazing how much more appealing freedom becomes when it doesn't arrive at the point of a sword." Tyrion's grin is sharp as a blade. "The Iron Bank has extended our credit again. They find our methods of debt collection refreshingly civilized." The conversation continues, touching on matters of trade and diplomacy, but Jaime's attention drifts to the window, where ravens wheel through the afternoon sky. Each bird carries messages that bind the realm together, not through fear, but through mutual benefit. Information flowing like water, nourishing growth wherever it touches. As evening approaches, and Tyrion departs for his own duties, Jaime returns to his memoirs. The pages spread before him tell a story that still seems improbable. The transformation of a golden prince who knew only how to destroy into a golden mind that has learned to build. "The hand that holds a sword rules through fear," he writes, the words flowing as naturally as water from a spring. Fear of pain, fear of death, fear of all the terrible things that steel can accomplish when wielded by one skilled in its use. But fear fades when the feared hand is no longer present. Fear dies with the man who inspired it, leaving nothing but graves and resentment to mark his passing. He pauses, looking at his golden prosthetic where it rests on the desk beside his ink pot. The craftsman who made it did beautiful work, every joint articulated, every finger perfectly formed, the whole surface polished to mirror brightness. It is a masterpiece of metalwork, and it is entirely useless for everything that truly matters. The mind that guides the realm rules through wisdom, he continues writing. Wisdom shared becomes wisdom multiplied. Knowledge given freely returns tenfold. The teacher's greatest victory comes not when students surpass their master, but when they forget they ever needed one. A soft knock interrupts his thoughts. Cersei enters, moving with the grace that has never left her, despite the years and the grey threads that now streak her golden hair. At 41, she remains beautiful, but it is a beauty deepened by intelligence and tempered by experience. "Still writing?" she asks, settling beside his chair and looking over the pages covered in his careful script. "Still trying to understand how we arrived at this moment," he replies. 5 years ago, we faced the destruction of everything our family had built. Now we have built something entirely new." She reads over his shoulder, her fingers trailing across the words with obvious pride. "Something that might actually last." They sit in comfortable silence, for two minds that have learned to work in perfect harmony. Outside, King's Landing settles into the peaceful rhythm of evening, shopkeepers closing their stalls, children playing in streets that know nothing of war, scholars debating in taverns where once only sellswords gathered to boast of their kills. "Do you think he understands?" Cersei asks quietly. "Joffrey, I mean. Does he realize how much the kingdom has changed?" Jaime considers this carefully. The boy king has grown into a young man of 20, shaped by advisors who value wisdom over cruelty, and guided by examples of strength that come from building rather than breaking. He will never be a great king in the old sense, will never lead charges or win battles through personal prowess. But he might become something rarer and more valuable, a king who rules through intelligence and mercy rather than fear and force. "I think he is learning," Jaime says finally, "as we all learned, as the realm itself is learning." The conversation drifts to other matters, their children growing into roles they were born to fill, the kingdom's future stretching bright and promising ahead of them, the satisfaction of work well done and purposes fulfilled. When Cersei eventually retires to her own chambers, Jaime returns to his writing with renewed purpose. The final pages of his memoirs concern themselves not with battles won or enemies defeated, but with something more profound, the discovery that true strength was never about the sword at all. The golden prince who pushed children from windows became the golden mind that lifts entire kingdoms toward better futures. The Kingslayer who murdered to protect those he loved became the king's hand who preserves what all should love: peace, prosperity, and the promise that tomorrow might be better than today. "I was a knight," he writes, as the candles burn low and King's Landing sleeps peacefully beyond his window. "I wore white cloaks and swore sacred oaths and believed that protecting meant holding a sword between threats and those I served. I killed a mad king to save a city and thought myself a hero for it. I drew steel in defense of my family and thought myself noble for it." He pauses, setting down his quill to rest his tired hand. The golden prosthetic gleams in the candlelight, beautiful and useless, a reminder of what he was and a symbol of what he became. "But I was wrong about everything that mattered," he continues. "The sword protects only until the sword is gone. The knight serves only until the knight falls. The guardian stands watch only until the guardian fails." The final words come slowly, each one weighted with the wisdom of years and the satisfaction of understanding finally achieved. The teacher, though, the teacher protects forever. Every mind enlightened becomes a light that can kindle other lights. Every student who learns to think becomes a guardian who needs no sword. Every child who grows up in a world shaped by wisdom rather than force becomes a protector of that world's future. He looks at his golden hand one final time, then picks up his quill with his left hand and writes the last sentence. I lost the hand that made me famous, and in losing it, I found the mind that might make me worthy of remembrance. The memoirs are complete. The story of the Golden Prince who became the Golden Mind is finished. And somewhere in the sleeping kingdom beyond his window, in schools and libraries, and the minds of children who will never know a world where might makes right, that story continues to unfold in ways that no sword could ever achieve. The hand that holds a sword rules through fear. The mind that guides the realm rules through wisdom, and wisdom, unlike fear, grows stronger when shared, lasting long after the one who first gave it has returned to dust. In the end, Jaime Lannister became the protector he always claimed to be, just not in any way he ever expected.